G'day and welcome to Xpress Lane, a podcast for small business owners and franchisors to better navigate the trials and tribulations of growing a successful company. It isn't easy, but the rewards are definitely worth it. So Xpress Lane is bringing you industry leaders who share their wisdom and give you support in kicking your small business goals this year. All right, joining me today is John O'Riordan, the Operations Manager for Australia and New Zealand with InXpress. And we'll be talking about something pretty close to our hearts here at InXpress, which is freight and shipping. But before we do, I'd like to welcome you, John. And if you could just give everybody a little update on yourself, a little bio, that'd be good, and we'll kick off after that.
Thanks, James. I've been with InXpress for just over 7 years, and I started out as a franchisee down in Melbourne. I worked for a couple of years down there with a business partner, Rob. I got into it because my friends from uni, Sam and Sean, they had a franchise in Sydney. I'd seen what they were doing, working with small businesses the year prior to I joined, and I guess I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to get out there and help small businesses, and so I started a franchise location in Melbourne. A few years in, when Sam and Sean got jobs elsewhere, so Sam actually got a job with InXpress USA, and Sean, he had other work that was pulling him in a different direction. So we actually merged our two franchises in 2016. And I have moved up to Brisbane, still working with businesses around Australia, helping them with their shipping needs. I did that right up until 2019. In 2020, I started working for the franchisor, and Rob continued to work in our franchise based in Melbourne. So a lot of time in front of small business, and just recently moved to the franchisor. So I guess my past is working with small businesses,
and also being a small business owner yourself, obviously too. So you understand some of the challenges not only in operating and administering a small business, but also getting it off the ground and scaling it as well. Because that business you have built with the team there is the second largest franchise in the InXpress network in Australia. So look, I think we'll just touch on a few things today, if we can, maybe for small businesses out there or people looking to ship either for the first time or maybe they're not happy with their current shipping arrangements, and we'll just cover off a few things operationally, administratively, to do with brand and associating yourself with the right brands, and of course the ever important pricing and what to look for there. From a small business perspective, let's talk about some of the pitfalls or what's really important from an operational perspective that they should be considering when choosing a shipping provider or making that first step into shipping either internationally or domestically.
It's such a vast and broad space, and depending on the business, depending on the product, depending if they're B2C, B2B, they really need to make the decision on their shipping partner with long-term growth in mind. That has to be done before, I guess, they launch really. But what we find out there is some of the pitfalls is that a business or a brand, the thought of shipping and which providers to use is an afterthought. There's so much going on when you're starting up a small business that you just kind of take for granted that someone's going to move the product from A to B, and that'll be that. Shipping's as easy as that. However, we've seen with lots of business that we work with that can undo a business if they haven't really thought out who they're going to ship with from day one, and is that carrier going to be suitable on in year 1, year 2, year 3. Not having that long-term growth plan is a pitfall, and it's what we see week in, week out.
I'll just jump ahead a little bit then, because I touched on brand before, and I was going to cover this a little bit later, but I think you've brought it up there yourself, so we'll segue in nicely. What should companies or businesses be looking for in their provider from a brand perspective?
With growth in mind, reliability is key. When I say the word DHL, that's a strong brand that a business knows is going to get their goods from A to B very quickly. With that in mind, they need to work with brands that are going to give their customers the best experience. And so, that's why we partner with carriers that can deliver that, and we advise our clients where the strengths are of each of those carriers and why they're strong there. And so I think that's probably the most important thing, is understanding that brand.
So it's trusted brand, it's proven performance in itself, especially in this day and age with a lot of tech shipping platforms out there and everything else. There's a new one popping up, here and there. It's quite a competitive space. Having that brand loyalty, I mean, I think InXpress is sort of 21 years plus now as well as a business that's obviously moved into that tech-enabled space too, and partnering with some of those loyal brands. So I think that's a really important point that you raised there as well, and probably dovetails back into some of the important administrative considerations for businesses, because a small business has got a number of challenges, right? One is the resource and the financial resource. How can they scale? How can they grow? You can put salespeople on, you can put other staffing on, and whatever else. You don't really want to be investing that in some of your shipping. And so, how important really this day and age do you see technology and as far as the part it plays for small businesses?
Super important, especially in the, I can break it down to the e-commerce space. There's so much going on in that space at the moment that you blink and there's a new player, there's different software, there's new shiny things that can help you get your product from all over the world with a click. Utilizing software so it suits the business needs is imperative for scalability in the brand, and we work with technology partners and our own technology to ensure that the shipping process is seamless. As an example, when a customer purchases something in the cart, all the data on where that shipment is going has already been entered in a shopping cart. It's important to capture that and turn that into a shipping label instantly, rather than having a double handle or make it a kind of warehousing nightmare for...
You don't want one of your staff members and so on. You don't want to be employing two people in your shipping department when you could ideally probably have none.
Exactly.
Just use the technology around you.
You want it to be easy. You want the data to be captured at the point of sale so that you can use that and focus your time on other things. That type of technology isn't utilised all the time in SMEs that we work with, and that's the type of businesses we speak to. That's a large majority of some of the pitfalls, I guess, in small business trying to scale their business.
And I think it's important as well for companies to have their own technology or control of their own development. And we see there are a lot of third-party software platforms out there that are very reliable. Being able to move with the market as well and adapt to the customer needs is really important. That e-commerce space is a really dynamic space. It's fast-moving. There are a lot of the growth in that sector is well known. We're talking about CAGRs of 20 to 25% per annum. It just keeps delivering those consistent levels of growth. So with that comes ever-shifting expectations of the customer, and then more pressure on a small business to then deliver, all the while trying to manage their inventory and staff and grow.
Well, one thing about the technology, it isn't really important. However, it can also be so confusing that you really forget the core movement in that transaction which is a carrier is moving that shipment from wherever it's picked up.
Yeah, that's right. We can all get caught
receiver.
up in the bells and whistles sometimes, but really it's just ensuring that workflow is built in to your provider's software, so it effectively communicates with those partners who really are doing the pickups and deliveries.
Yeah, and making sure the software works for you.
Can you just talk to us quickly about the technology options available to shippers?
There's lots of software that have strengths. And so if you're a business, or you're looking to start a business, or especially an online business, there's software that will give you the best and most competitive sea freight option to import products. There's software that you'll be able to get a competitive rate to book samples back and forth. And they're different software, so they play to their strength. There's software where you can create your online store and have a shopping cart. And there's, top three that I can rattle off: Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, that are kind of best in field. Following on from that, there's software that your customers will be able to see that gives them a positive tracking experience, utilizing the best in field there to give your customers visibility on where their shipment is going. And there's software again that in your shopping cart that captures that data of when they've bought the goods and takes it into a new interface where it's generated into a label very quickly. So it's about picking those 5 or 6 best in market softwares and utilizing them for your business.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot to take in there and some really good points. I think you've covered some of the key areas, but I think that's probably a future podcast for us, actually. I think we might explore that a little bit further. So we might get you back in the future just to talk to us about those and give some examples in more specific detail. But look, thanks for that. I'm sure that was informative.
Bamboozling stuff sometimes, but when we break it down, it can be simplified.
So, John, in your experience, what would you typically recommend to any business, but small businesses in particular, which is, the topic for today, when they are managing their supply chain, I guess, from a shipping perspective?
Well, definitely a multi-carrier solution. That certainly nullifies a bit of the risk.
And why is that? Wouldn't that just create more complexity for them to manage different partners?
Well, having a multi-carrier solution available to them doesn't mean they just chop and change all the time. They might be comfortable with one carrier at that particular point in time, and they might use that consistently for a year. But if something goes wrong, an example that comes to mind is a few years ago, a carrier, they had a virus or that malware attack where their systems were down for about 3 weeks. If you had a single carrier solution, the time that it would take to adapt and set up with another carrier.
Well, they don't have accounts, do they? They've got to go through that whole process.
And carriers require, a commitment to volume, and they're not just going to particularly open up an account for an unknown shipper on the spot.
They won't have an account manager.
They won't have an account manager, so the ability to be able to adapt and quickly shift your goods onto another carrier on the run it certainly mitigates that risk. And I mean, there is no risk in that scenario.
Well, I think especially if I pick up on what you were saying earlier, if there's one platform that these carriers are all presented to you.
There's the benefit of the day-to-day multi-carrier solution, and that we can go granular and look at a carrier's stronger on one particular lane and a carrier's cheaper on another lane. The business day-to-day has the option to save money that way, but it's also a longer term strategic advantage to be able to assess how the carrier is performing for your business and make longer term changes. So I think that's probably it dives a bit deeper than just the day-to-day swapping carriers.
I think so as well, and also being able to shift quickly to another carrier without having to set up completely new accounts and build new relationships.
And carriers, they have strengths. They have freight that they love and freight that they don't, and each carrier is different. So and that changes as well. So as we've seen last year, things can change. Carriers can focus on different things, want certain cargo in their network. So the ability to move quickly in that space and have options is certainly important.
What sort of cargo would cause concerns for a carrier? Say, typically if someone was looking to ship an e-commerce shipment internationally, what would a carrier be looking for?
Internationally, it's the easy one internationally is the heavier it is, the harder it is. Example that comes to mind more domestically is the B2C space. Carriers, we're in a time right now where it's uncertain how we adapt to the shift to the B2C. So everything's kind of fluid at the moment, and carriers are trying to find their feet and how they adapt to that. And some are doing better than others, some are trialing things different to others. But while we're in that space, it's important to be able to turn around and see how they're performing and which carrier is going to perform best for your business. And you mentioned shipments overseas, even furniture that's going to a lot of houses and residential at the moment. That's proving difficult with airlines.
And that's just a congestion in the networks domestically, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if an uptake of flat packs, moving around the network, they're awkward. They can't just go down a conveyor belt.
Now, flat packs are furniture and associated
furniture and things that you put together yourself, but also internationally, airlines are struggling. Well, there simply is no capacity for the airlines. So anything that was big and bulky, they're having challenges right now in terms of getting it cheaply across seas.
I'd imagine as well, just put your InXpress hat on, I think, for a second, and InXpress working with some providers who have their own freight and capacity or fleet and capacity. So they sort of, so you need, I guess, important consideration is that your network isn't going to be as susceptible to some external factors as perhaps we've seen through the recent issues around passenger aircraft not flying and freight moving in the belly of those aircraft, really putting a bit of an impact on or creating congestion points.
Yeah, it's some of the things we've learnt, and it's incredible how smoothly things run when everything's going well and those supply chains aren't interrupted. But those supply chains are held together by deals at different ends of countries, and when it falls apart, like it did, freight can just sit there because there's always someone willing to pay more for that space on that plane. And so the lowest value product, the product that moves the kind of lightest weight, they seem to suffer.
I also just going to pick up on something earlier as well. You talked about buying power and contracts. And I think that's something that people should consider as well. Is has your provider got the agreements in place, and are they moving the volume that will allow your cargo to then to be prioritised over others when these sort of high volume congestion issues happen?
Postal carriers, they're at the mercy of the supply chain, and they don't obviously have their own fleets of planes. And other carriers we work with, express carriers, they have the luxury of being able to charter their planes, and they have their own resources that they can assist their customers with, which is a benefit.
That's good. Look, thanks for that, John. I think there's some really good points you've made. And it's probably similar to the other one. We can probably have another podcast on that in the future, because it is quite detailed there. Do you think that the businesses are, we talked to pricing now, we've covered operations and some of the tech side of things as well. And there's value in all of that as well. And obviously the technology investments companies make come at a cost too. And then shipping, the market is quite fluid, and so it's a competitive space. So there's a balance in there as well. How important is pricing for businesses? Should they be focusing on the transactional price, or should they be looking at the value that this partner brings more holistically?
I mean, every business is different. If you're selling a product that's 50 cents or $1, shipping's not really going to be something that you're open to use as a tool to get more customers. Strong brands, businesses that want to have a global reach with their customers, pricing isn't just that initial transaction. There's a lot of things on top of it. Does the customer need it yesterday? And do they have that option with 1, 2, or even 3 carriers? Do they have someone that can let them know that they might be ready for a different carrier, or they're outgrowing a certain shipping strategy? There's multiple layers with that. So I don't think that if you're a business that wants to grow, that you treat shipping as just that, transaction. You treat it as an opportunity to, grow your business and use it as a tool to plan.
I think also with that, plan in conjunction with your service provider's representative, whether it be a freight consultant from InXpress or whether it be an account manager from somewhere else. The technology is really important, but without any front-end interaction, with a person, finding that customised solution for your needs is a little bit more difficult, and you are sort of forced into that ship and hope scenario in some respects.
And we had a really good example last year. Without mentioning any of the carriers, COVID was obviously a tough time for not just the end customers, but the carriers themselves, with their networks being clogged up. In a need for them to continue their value proposition, they needed to implement certain surcharges and certain costs. So that was across the board with all the carriers. However, if you have a consultant or someone that's able to advise you on where to look if these things are going to cause a big impact in your business, very quickly on the run, you'll have someone that can change your shipping or point you in the right direction of where to go next. That includes shifting carriers. It might include shifting part of your operation to a different carrier. And that's something that if you just work with a carrier directly, you're unlikely to get that higher level analysis to assist on the strategy and in the end affect the bottom line of the business.
Yeah, that's right. I think having options is really important, being open to utilising those options as well, and thinking a little bit more creatively about those shipping options you do have, because it does have a bottom line impact ultimately. Hey, changing speed a little bit here, why don't you give us some examples from the field, some interesting things you've seen over the years, or some mistakes that could have easily been avoided, some funny stories?
Like I've touched on, we've been able to help businesses split their shipping. We've walked into businesses, they've been doing something a certain way for many years, and we've been able to offer them a faster solution that their customers love. One particular example is a clothing company that was using a postal carrier. They didn't stop using the postal carrier, but they wanted to add an express carrier in DHL so that their customers had choice. And it was amazing for them. The impact for us was obviously we get a new client, but for them, they were able to eliminate a lot of customer service inquiries. It was kind of awesome to be a part of that, because the impact that we delivered wasn't, that we're giving them faster carrier to use. It was actually because of that, their clients were getting the goods faster, and they weren't chasing them for, where is this, what's going on. one funny one that stands out is there was a cyclone in Tonga, unfortunately, I think in 2018. And we did a bit of work with the Melbourne Rebels, and they had a drive to get dry goods and food in a shipping container that they were going to send to Tonga. There was a bit of a deadline because the receiving end only had a short while to pick up all the food. So we actually had to call Tonga. We spoke to someone at the port there in Tonga, and we were able to coordinate the goods being released and deemed as charitable goods, so there wasn't any duties on them. So we assisted with that. They were able to get all the dry goods and food to the people that needed it.
So the Rebels were running some sort of aid with clothing and so on for people through that community. Yeah,
they filled an entire shipping container with all the goods donated. They just had a bit of trouble at the other end. They weren't able to clear it, obviously duties and taxes, and we were able to negotiate with the authorities on the other end and get that moving for them.
I think that's a really important aspect to any service offering in this space as well. It's partnering with a provider who is there on the other end of the phone, who is a real person. And we have mentioned the technology before. It's really important. They need to be tech enabled, but more important, I guess, is that one-on-one touch point.
Those are the ones I remember because they're more to do with the strategy rather than just trying to onboard a
It's
client.
interesting, that story too, because it really ties into some of what we've just been talking about here as well. You know, you're talking about some savings in customer service and efficiencies there as well. It's not just the shipping team or department. It has a flow-on effect to other departments in a business when you're working with a efficiency mindset. And also some of that, you know, a customer might have an idea they want to use a certain provider, whether it be a DHL or a FedEx or whoever else it is, UPS. As a sort of standalone company, they may not have the buying power that a provider with an aggregated buying philosophy actually has as well. So in addition to the transactional savings there's administrative savings in efficiencies for customer service teams as well. So that's really good. Look, John, at this point, I think we've covered a lot of really important items. I just want to recap for everybody. When you're looking for a shipping provider, no matter what stage of the business journey you're on, whether you're a startup, whether you're a little bit further along down the track, you need to ask what operational saving is this company bringing me, and how are they going to improve my operations? You also need to consider, is there an administrative benefit to what this provider is showing me today, and are there going to be efficiencies and cost savings I can benefit from outside of just transactional price reduction? Because value is really important. Brand, working with trusted, proven brands who invest in their own growth and reinvest in their own technology and development, and also those that are moving so much volume that it really makes sense from an aggregated pricing perspective to consider them and work with them. So they're the four key areas. I mean, John, did you have any additional points you wanted to close on with everyone today?
I think they're some of the core areas for sure. I think it's still people doing business with other people, and that's kind of an exciting thing to do. And especially coming out of last year, I guess I get a kick out of helping businesses and having that kind of human aspect to it. There's a shared growth in what we do, and it's fulfilling to actually, I guess, assist other people in building their businesses. So going back to a bit more, human element, that's kind of the important part for me as well.
Yeah, very good. Well, it's nice to hear from you today as a small business owner, as somebody who's grown a business from scratch that now brings in well over $1 million in margin, and also who's made the transition into an operations role covering 2 countries. I'm James Buck. Thank you for listening to Xpress Lane. Don't miss any of our small business insights by subscribing to the Xpress Lane podcast on your favourite podcast platform, or connect with InXpress Australia and New Zealand on Facebook and LinkedIn. And for anyone keen to join our global InXpress franchise network or to learn more about our services, visit our website inxpress.com. Stay safe and catch you next time.